Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. And my apologies for keeping you a few minutes late. I know the Taoiseach actually took you through some of the key measures and investments announced in Budget 2018 when it comes to housing and to homelessness, the increased funding, the new finance vehicle, the CGT step-out, and so on. As well as our increased ambition for social housing, I think this budget is important because it removes some of the remaining significant obstacles when it comes to building more homes, building them more quickly, and building them at more affordable prices. I know that the Taoiseach also signalled the establishment of a construction sector group as part of a whole-of-construction strategy. I discussed this some months ago with your Director General, Tom Parlin. It's an important initiative, and we should get started with it as quickly as possible because we have big challenges ahead, and we have to plan in a coordinated way for the future. And that doesn't mean politicians deciding in a vacuum over in government buildings somewhere and then expecting the construction industry to follow. If government goes off in one way and the industry doesn't follow it, then we're not going to get done what we need to get done. So it means consulting with you, working through potential obstacles, understanding the landscape and opportunities, and setting down a plan that all stakeholders can work together. So in that context, I'd like to focus my remarks today on the new National Planning Framework, Ireland 2040, our plan, which is currently out for its final round of public consultation. I'm currently reading a book called The History of Future Cities. It wasn't recommended to me by Pascal Dunne, who is part of the government book club that's there at the moment. Unfortunately, he recommends comic books to me and things like that. I'm not sure if he appreciates my intellectual capacity, but it's an excellent book, and it talks about in its opening chapters some cities of the past, future cities that became old cities today, Mumbai, St. Petersburg, and Shanghai. And it's very interesting to read about the vision that was brought to each of those cities at the time by different people and for different reasons. They weren't always necessarily positive visions or positive motivations behind the vision, perhaps, but the design of these cities, the vision, the inspiration, would have a profound impact on their own country's history and development, and indeed the world's history and development for the following century. And as we sit here today in 2017, looking ahead, of course, in the context of this week to 2018, we also look ahead to 2040. And we are tasked perhaps with less grand aspirations, but with no less important a mission: to plan and to manage the sustainable growth and development of our country over the next 20 years or so. And that is very challenging. First of all, and unlike in the case of the city of St. Petersburg, which was essentially built from scratch, we are not starting from scratch. We have an already developed country with 5 main cities and a developed network of transport infrastructure. We have a great history and heritage in our built environment already, and that has to be protected. And we have to be conscious of climate mitigation targets and putting sustainability at the forefront of all of our endeavours as we grow. And we will grow. By 2040, there'll be at least an extra 1 million people living in this republic, taking the population to just under 6 million. That's a 20% increase on what we have today. The all-island population will be roughly 8 million people. There'll be an extra 600,000 jobs, mainly in the knowledge economy and in the services sector. And we'll need 500,000 new homes for all of these people. The population aged over 65 will double to 1.3 million people at almost 1/4 of the total population. And those aged under 15 will fall to just under 1 million people. And it's not possible to know what the political and economic challenges might be for all those people living and working here in 2040. But there are political and economic challenges that we have to be aware of now as we plan for our shared future. Brexit is the most obvious one, but we also have to talk about the future of the European Union and how it might evolve and how that might challenge us into the future. The current retreat from globalization and free trade being pursued by certain countries will or could have an impact on things like foreign direct investment and what that might mean, not just for Dublin, but of course for the important investments that we have up and down the country. What will happen in technology and the changes that that will bring for how we work and for where we live when we think about things like remote working, the shared economy, drone technology, automation, and of course artificial intelligence. And communities, protecting our communities as we grow, regenerating parts of our country where we can because we must. If we continue to grow as we have been, if the status quo maintains, depleting our communities and our regions, sprawling away from our urban cores, then our cities will choke off, in particular our economic engine of Dublin, and the country will die. People might question this notion. They might say that things, relatively speaking today, and putting to one side the crisis in homelessness and the current housing shortage, they might say that things are not so bad. We're in the top 10 in the world when it comes to things like human development, GDP per capita, foreign direct investment, democracy. That's all true. But we fall then into the top 20 when it comes to quality of life and environmental performance, and we fall again into the top 30 in Dublin when we talk about livable cities. There's something that we're missing when we talk about quality of life. There's something that we're missing when we talk about livable cities. So our national planning framework, Ireland 2040, our plan, has to have a vision that will navigate us through these challenges, both the existing ones that we know of, like protecting our environment, but also the challenges that may come due to developments that are essentially external to us. We've had spatial strategies before and they have failed. So how will this new strategy be different? Well, first of all, it's going to be aligned across governmental departments. So there will be coherence between what the framework envisions and what others are planning, be that in relation to the development and planning of schools or hospitals or roads or our rail infrastructure. For the first time, the national planning framework will align with a 10-year national investment plan. We're putting our money where our mouth is. Our capital investment will underpin our planning framework so that these plans are real. And thirdly, the national framework will be the bedrock or foundation for all other development plans in this country. The framework will be completed this year. Next year, our 3 regions will be tasked with coming up with more specific regional, spatial and economic strategies based upon the framework and in more detail, with city and county plans, based upon that, and then local area plans based upon that again. This will be the new hierarchy, and it will be set in law. And finally, there will be a smart growth fund put in place centrally to enable regions to target growth and development for key areas by competing for additional funding, based on the merit of the project, of course, but also ensuring that it is in line with the 10-year National Investment Plan and our 2040 National Planning Framework. And the government's been working on this plan since it took a decision towards the end of 2014. There have been roadshows, there have been public consultations, there's an expert advisory group that's been advising us, and there have been over 700 submissions from a whole range of stakeholders. And over the next number of weeks, you'll have a final chance to make your views known, helping the government to finalise the National Planning Framework document by the end of this year, so we can get to work immediately at the beginning of next year. And one of the core principles at the heart of the National Planning Framework is to concentrate growth in the core of our population centres, to focus development in existing villages, towns, urban centres and cities, to stop sprawling inefficiently outwards, and to focus on higher density and on infill development. This is particularly important in our cities. And what it means is moving away from that idea that every new build must be a suburban 3- or 4-bed family home. And I recently made some announcements around changes to the guidelines to promote the building of a more mixed and more modern form of housing, especially in our city centres. And as the economy continues its recovery, as we build more houses and improve the lives of people locked out of the housing market or trapped in emergency accommodation, a key challenge for all of us will be around expectations, about meeting the expectations of people when it comes to important quality of life issues. And you'll find that turning our attention towards these quality of life issues, things like commuting times, energy efficiency of homes, affordability, community, these will all make sense also from an economic and an efficiency point of view as we capitalise upon the existing and the planned infrastructural investment. Our cities and large towns are growing as major centres of employment, but they are not growing quickly enough as places to live. The population of Ireland grew by 53,000 people in the year to April 2017. That's the largest increase since 2008. It's 1.1% year-on-year growth, and the rest of the euro area is essentially static. That is a challenge for us, but it's also an opportunity. But when we look at the challenges that it does present, half the daytime population of Ireland's 3 largest cities travel from the outside. 1/4 of Leinster's working population travel into Dublin each day to work. In 2016, 230,000 people commuted at least an hour every day each way, and that was a 30% increase in long commutes in just a 5-year period. Just think about what that means for quality of life issues when it comes to families and trying to balance those priorities that you might have in your day or in your working week. And if we learned anything from the so-called Celtic Tiger era, it was that our future does not lie in our people living in one location and commuting up to 100 kilometres away to work to try and juggle those life balances. That tears at the fabric of our families, but it also tears at the fabric of our communities. So we have a challenge as we grow into the future to tackle those challenges that we face today because of the growing economy. With less than 1,000 properties available for rent in Dublin and similar low levels in all of the cities, there's not just an undersupply of suitable housing in the right location, but there's also a gaping hole in the supply of affordable accommodation, rental accommodation in particular, in the heart of our cities. And turning that tide means that we simply have to deliver more apartments in our cities and our urban cores. And again, the announcements that I made recently speak to fixing that problem and turning that tide. Yes, we have an immediate crisis in housing that we have to face, but if we can pause to plan just for a moment, we can tackle that crisis. But we can also secure the sustainable development of our country and our communities into 24 and beyond. We have to think about our actions now, in the decades ahead, if one crisis isn't to simply roll into another. So when we look at the growth of 1 million people and where they might live in the future, we have to try and manage that growth between our 5 cities as well as between our 3 regions. So in the national planning framework, we look ahead and we talk about Dublin and what that means for Dublin. It means 25% of national growth happening within Dublin, and half of that, again, within the M50. That will mean joining up our local planning authorities. If not joining them into one large Dublin authority, at least joining up the planning function in some way so we can have coherency across the 4 Dublin local authorities to plan that growth. It means looking at current land banks that aren't being used efficiently and changing their use. If you look to an area, and you look at this from a satellite photo around the Naas Road, you have the Canalway, you have the M50, you have the Lewis, you have fantastic infrastructure in place. But is it the most efficient use of land if that's where we are selling trucks and cars and furniture and using the land in that way with so much great infrastructure around it? Can we put that large piece of land to better use? Can we provide modern, affordable homes and new communities for our citizens working in the city? I think we can. It means around 25% of our forecast growth happening in the cities of Cork, Waterford, Limerick and Galway. Each will have to effectively double in size over the period to 2040, which is a big challenge for each of those areas. Again, if you look at the Georgian core in Limerick City, there's less than 1,000 people living there. If you look to Waterford and that great opportunity that we have on the North Quay, now that land, that strategic piece of land is now effectively owned by the local authorities, and we know the investments that we have to make. How can we help improve Waterford in that regard? We know the challenges around Galway, particularly when it comes to transport and commuting times, and the huge potential of Cork and its ability to grow and to double in size and to become another international city, competing for business, competing for investment. It'll also mean that 50% of the population growth will happen everywhere else outside of our cities. And it will mean that 15% of the growth will take place in the fabric of our towns, villages, and rural areas. And we have a problem with rural decline, and we have to find a way to regenerate parts of our countries. But fortunately, some of the challenges that technology will present to us over the coming years will also create opportunities. When we think about things like transport times being improved because of new technology, or the need to not even commute because of remote working practices or improvements in broadband infrastructure. All of those opportunities and what that will mean for where we choose to live and where we can also work as well. And another way to look at the potential growth and how we have to manage it over the coming years to 2040, half of the anticipated growth, we need to manage half of it along the eastern seaboard and the Midlands, and the other half, effectively, in the southern, western, and northern regions. This all has significant implications for what we build, how we build it, and where. And so again, it's a smart move to put together a whole of construction strategy, working with you and others to make sure that we can make that vision a reality. And if we think back to the quality of life challenge that we have to build communities, we have to build places. I talk about this all the time when I talk about the immediate crisis that we have in homelessness and the shortage that we have in housing supply. Yes, we could move tomorrow very quickly to build many thousands of houses, but would we be building them in the right places? Would they have the right infrastructure around them, the right investments? Would we be building communities? Or would we be building problems that we'd only have to tackle in 15, 20, or 25 years down the line? That's why it's very important that we focus on community and we focus on quality of life as we build and build more quickly. And if we think of our aging population as well, when we think about communities and quality of life, almost a quarter of the population aged 65 or over, we have to build communities. We have to think about building for that aging population so that they can continue to live in communities, in their villages, towns, urban centres, and cities. We have to think about people who are less able than us, people who have other health issues, because we know that it's better for their quality of life and all of our quality of life if we can live together again in those shared communities. And we have to think about affordability, being able to live close to work at an affordable price. It cuts down your commute time, which is better for you. It cuts down travel costs. It cuts down things like greenhouse gas emission, carbon emissions. It's better for everything, for your health and for your well-being, but it's also better for our economic management and making sure that we're investing our public money, our taxpayers' money, effectively and efficiently, and getting the most back from our resources, getting bang for our buck. So we have to think about affordability as we plan for the future. So just to conclude, thank you very much for inviting me to address you here today. It goes without saying that your sector has a key role as we finalise and implement Ireland 2040, our plan, the National Planning Framework. I look forward to any further submissions that you may have during this final consultation period, and I am very eager to get our construction sector group together and working together so that we can navigate those challenges that we know we face today and those new challenges that will present themselves over the next 20 to 25 years. And in navigating those challenges, securing new opportunities for all of our citizens in this republic. Thank you very much, and good luck with your conference.